welcome back to the Be More podcast, where we inspire you to be a little bit more of every role within the Salesforce ecosystem and beyond. For today's session, we are exploring what it takes to be more hospitality in a predominantly Salesforce-based context. And I'm joined today by Tracy. So Tracy, are you okay to introduce yourself to our audience for me, please?
Absolutely. So, as Tom's alluded to, I'm Tracy. I work predominantly in the hospitality sector as a Salesforce consultant, working on all sorts of projects, from ones that I build and implement myself to also working on larger projects with Salesforce partners, where I then support the project in terms of translating what the hospitality client is asking for into Salesforce technology and terminology.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's great to have you here today. And the power of the Salesforce ecosystem, the amazing Emma Keeling connected us. So really grateful for that, and look forward to diving in and learning what this is all about. So maybe to start off, are you able to introduce your role for us? Really, we know it's kind of involved in hospitality, and it potentially spans different traditional Salesforce roles like consultant, admin, developer, maybe a bit of project manager and business analyst as well. But how does that work kind of day in, day out for you?
It makes life very varied, which is why I got Salesforce in the first place. I am eternally inquisitive. I love to network, and there's definitely lots of opportunity for that within the Salesforce Ohana. And I think having a mix of clients and a mix also of hospitality types. So sometimes I'm working with hotels, sometimes I'm working with restaurants, sometimes I'm working with hotel management companies, where the tech can be very, very challenging. So it leads for a very, very varied life. And it also means that I get exposure to some wonderful Salesforce products as well, not just Sales Cloud, but also Service, Marketing Cloud, communities. So I think the power of Salesforce for hospitality is that it is unlike no other system that exists inside hospitality. And I don't know whether that's the same for other verticals as well, but Salesforce is a massively innovative company. You know, I've worked in the ecosystem now 12, 13 years, and first as a user and now in the roles that I do now. And Salesforce has changed out of all recognition in that time. You know, Steve Moe was saying about how, you know, there were certain things that didn't even exist when he started in the ecosystem on your podcast the other day. And it's really important, I think, to be aware of that when working in the hospitality vertical, because, you know, PMS is king for hospitality, which is a property management system that deals with all of the checking in, all the checking out, all of the invoices, all of the booking from all the different distribution channels, whether you've booked on booking.com or whether you've booked via a travel agent or whether you've booked on the hotel website. So Salesforce is sat in this really innovative space, but the PMSs, so one of the largest companies globally is Opera, which is by Oracle, and the whole suite of PMS products. Those products haven't changed inherently in their look and feel and their function in the entire time that I've been in hospitality. And I started at 17. So that was quite a few years ago. So it's really interesting for me and really exciting to be involved with a company like Salesforce, where things are evolving and moving so quickly. And that's exciting for hospitality too, because they generally got very siloed data, old systems, some of them still using XML. So it's very exciting for them, but can also be overwhelming, which I suppose is where I then come in to help put things into layman's terms.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that sounds like great fun, and sounds like you have opportunity to make a real difference and potentially get some of your clients excited and interested about Salesforce as well, which is, I think, part of what this is all about. So that's great. And kind of thinking now in terms of hospitality in particular, do the requirements of the client vary dependent on what type of hospitality kind of client they are? Or Are there kind of common themes?
That's a great question, and yeah, absolutely. And I did some work with the Salesforce travel, transport, and hospitality team a little while
Hmm.
ago, because understanding the ownership of a hotel is absolutely key to understanding what their tech stack might look like. Because I think as a consumer, you go to a Holiday Inn and you think it's a Holiday Inn, and that
Hmm.
was where I met Emma, by the way, at Intercontinental Hotel. Whereas from a hotel owner perspective, that might be a Holiday Inn that's owned and run by Intercontinental Hotels, but it also could be a hotel that is owned by a private equity firm that then has a
Hmm.
management company that runs the business from an operational perspective. So if you're an owner operator, it's quite easy to understand what the tech is. You own the tech, so you have the
Yeah.
rights to whether you can integrate that with anything else. Whereas if you're a management company, and my background was in management companies, so we one of the longest stints I spent was with a company that was multi-brand and multi-franchise. So we were working with 8 different global brands, and
Mm.
all of those global brands dictate what systems you use.
Yeah.
And they also control whether you can have access to that data or not, and at what point you might be able to have access to that data. So integration is a common topic because everybody wants to see the 360-degree view of the customer. Of
Mhm.
course, that makes our
Yeah.
life so much easier. But whether you can get to that data is not a question or not.
Mm.
And also whether that system even has an open API, which is a whole other
Yeah.
fish to get involved in, which makes life interesting, because as much as there's some very similar use cases, people want to manage their pipeline, they want to see how much business their sales teams are closing, they want to know what the major reasons are for losing business,
Mm.
being able to be in contact with their customers and do a certain level of account management is all stuff that is important and is common use cases across multiple hospitality companies. But the tech stack of what you might be implementing that into, and the I suppose also the budget to deliver that
Yeah.
can vary wildly from one hospitality company to another, depending on the ownership.
If some of these systems that you're integrating with are quite rigid,
Mhm.
and quite old, then I can understand where the challenge comes with integrating, because, as you say, they just might not have the APIs to even do anything. Salesforce has lots of different APIs. If the system's really that old and almost legacy, and maybe the client's locked into it and they can't do anything about switching, then I guess that presents its own challenges as well, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I've worked with a couple of iPaaS solutions, where
Mm.
we've actually consumed XML messages from, you know, particular PMS systems that don't have an open API, and then we've applied some logic to that to then be able to put it into Salesforce. But you know, I think it's very easy in a Salesforce ecosystem, and when you're working with customers that are very innovative and have new tech stacks, and that
Yeah.
anything is possible, the world is your oyster, and
Yeah.
that's brilliant. That's really exciting when you get one of those projects. But I
Yeah.
think also there's the other side out there that sometimes, there are blockers, or there's dirty data that you don't
Mm.
just want to hook something up into something else because it will cause an absolute mess. One of the most prominent PMS systems out there can allow you to create duplicates. Equally, that's part of the challenge, to overcome that obstacle and to get the data into the right place for the customer so that they can leverage that for their sales opportunities.
Yeah, totally. And as a result, hopefully get a little bit closer to that 360-degree view that Salesforce marketing team are always peddling, right?
Completely. And I think there are some real positive stories out there as well. I'm working with a restaurant company at the moment, and
Mm.
they have integrated almost everything. So coming into Sales Cloud,
Nice.
we have their Wi-Fi data, we have their restaurant bookings, both individual and private functions. We have their whole sales team in the system managing all of the events, right through to delivering function sheets and actually getting the customers on site on the day and all the event planning. Um,
Mm.
we've also integrated the website, so there's live availability on the website, so that even for functions, we can book that straight away.
Yeah.
We've got so many things. The voucher system is integrated, so we can see who's buying vouchers. And then all of that data, because it's so rich, is being consumed by Data Cloud, and then that's going into Marketing Cloud. So then the marketing team have got so many ways they can segment their data to really wow the customers with really perfectly timed emails with the right kind of content that actually, that's a real success story from my point of view. We are surfacing a questionnaire on a website using a link for the customers to complete all of their pre-orders and all of their event details, which will then feed directly back into Salesforce.
Nice.
So yeah, it's quite an exciting project because the teams here have thought so innovatively around how they can leverage the technology.
Well, that sounds great fun, and sounds like it feels magical when you bring everything together and deliver those connected experiences. So that's great. Kind of moving on a little bit now, but in a project, and appreciate, sounds like the shape of your projects is different quite often. But what type of other roles do you interact with within those projects? So we kind of touched on other Salesforce partners and perhaps developers, as well as obviously the client. What other kind of key roles do you usually see? Do you see other admins, consultants, developers?
It tends to be that most of my projects, it's the client, me, and a Salesforce consultant that has a mix of all of those roles. And I suppose the larger the project, the more resource you need to deliver that anyway.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, we don't probably work with as many admins because it tends to be the simple tasks, I will complete anyway, or we might have a build where there's some stuff going on, but for the more complicated builds, there's always a level of other stuff that needs to be done that's beyond my skill set. So we have to have somebody that's more technical than myself involved in that to make sure that we're getting things set up properly. And that's been a huge learning curve for me over the years of different projects that I've been involved with, different consultants and how they approach different projects, whether they go straight into, discovery, whether there's been a proper, not proper, that's not the word I'm looking for, but sometimes
Formal.
like a formal pre-sales requirement. Sometimes it's like a very woolly situation that you start with.
Yeah.
I think that's not always on the side of Salesforce. Sometimes, often that's on the side of hospitality, because the vast majority of hospitality customers that I have do not have a internal IT team. They might have somebody that orders new laptops for people, and they might have somebody that is, managing a few bits and bobs or the hardware for things. But quite often, even their support is outsourced to an external company.
Yeah.
So, that can make things quite challenging when you're looking at what actually is the scope of work on this particular project, because the people describing that are sales directors, they're, marketing teams that are very creative and, creating adverts and copy and all sorts of wonderful things. But not necessarily understanding how to write SQL query in Marketing Cloud, or even what that means. So, it's important, I think, to deal with all of these people in the Salesforce partners. And there are a lot of roles that we come into contact with, because we need the developers, we need the consultants, we need a technical architect to make sure that the architecture of the whole project makes sense from start to end, particularly when there's a lot of integrations. But I think also, it's quite interesting from the client side as to who sometimes gets involved in those projects and who the leads are, that are oftentimes in hospitality not particularly technical, without, dissing the whole hospitality group. They're just trying to do the best they can with the smallest resources they've got.
No, totally get that. And it's quite interesting that it sounds like the majority of them have their IT outsourced. I think you would see that in other industries, like maybe retail as well. So might brain is kind of firing in all directions now and trying to make these connections, these similarities. So really enjoying this conversation, and maybe thinking about this now from your point of view. Do you just exclusively work with people or clients in the hospitality sector, or do you venture into kind of other industries as well?
So I have ventured into other industries, and this is why I love the power of networking, because
Mm,
during COVID, there was obviously a little bit of a situation in hospitality in the
yeah,
thing closed.
yeah,
Um, and there were quite a lot of contacts that I've worked with in the past who moved on to other industries purely because of the situation they found themselves in and the
mm,
requirement to pay their mortgages. Um, and then as they've moved into other industries and required Salesforce, they've then asked my advice on something, or they've asked me if I can get involved in the project. I've done a couple of non-profit pieces of work because
uh-huh.
either Emma's not had capacity and we work quite closely together,
Yeah,
or I did some pro bono work during COVID because I can't stand not being busy. So I
yeah,
worked with UK Harvest, which is a food bank and food education charity, clear really near to where I live. So I
mm,
did some work with them, and I continue to do some work with them actually. Um, I also did some work with a procurement company who were basically helping hospitality clients procure better. So
nice.
that was a really interesting project because I'd never worked in that vertical before. And then they ended up recommending me to somebody that worked in energy, so green energy and carbon consultancy,
Okay.
um, which is like stepping into the crystal maze. I
Yeah,
had a brilliant project with them. We've had some brilliant times. And last week she phoned me with a question, and I was just like, "You need to show me again what we built because it's been a
yeah,
year. I can't remember." And it's
yeah,
like my brain's falling out my ear. So it was,
yeah.
yeah, it all comes with its challenges. But that's again the beauty of Salesforce. It can be
Mm,
leveraged for so many different use cases that that actually makes things really malleable and really exciting for me because variety is the spice of life.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's great to hear, and kind of in between the lines there, the power of your network or the power of having successful clients leads to other successful clients, right? So
100%, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think that's really important too. So if there's anybody out there that's listening to this and they're looking to start out in a Salesforce based role within hospitality, what kind of tips advice would you give to that person?
That's a really good question. Um, I would certainly say use the power of your network
Mm,
because, you know, I set up my own business after being made redundant from a UK role with a hotel management company. And my first piece of business was the hotels that were being sold, which was why I was being made redundant, was my first build that I built Salesforce for them as my first
oh,
company
okay.
solo. So it was the power of my network in that situation, and working with those teams that brought me my first customer. They're still a customer today, and that was nearly 8 years ago. Um,
Mm,
so that and the amount of recommendations they've given me, I'll be eternally grateful for. So it's one of those things. I think that network is everything, and also, that is also a two-way street.
yeah.
So I always try and reach out to anybody that needs help if there's something that I can add value to what they're asking for.
Uh-huh.
Because then if you're prepared to give your time for things and you're prepared to put yourself out there, then when you do ask for help, it's more likely that you will then get response to that. So
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
a really big believer that it needs to be a two-way street. And, if you do a job well and you'll treat people with kindness, that hopefully that will come back to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I love how we come back to kindness there, because I think that's really important, to be kind to yourself, but also be kind to your clients and your customers. And eventually that will start paying for itself, like that will have the positive impact. So I
Yeah.
think that's great. And now, taking a brief moment to kind of reflect on your journey so far within hospitality,
Mhm.
if you were to start out again, would you do anything differently or approach it in different way, for example?
So I heard you ask this of somebody else on one of your other
Mm.
episodes. I've been thinking about it all day because
Yeah.
I'm also a yoga teacher, so I also very much live my life in the moment.
Yeah.
And I've always I really do believe that I wouldn't be where I am today doing what I'm doing if I hadn't have had all of the experiences and the obstacles that I had to overcome in order to get here. Um,
Mm.
and I really love what I do right now. I've got a huge difference of things that happen in a day, in a week, in a month. I've got different interests. I can balance all of those, which is brilliant. And I'm always learning, which for an inquisitive mind is really important. So there are things I could have done differently, but then I wouldn't have
Mhm.
had the learning from that thing,
Yeah.
and then I wouldn't be here. So I kind of feel it's a no hashtag no regrets. I don't want to sound really big headed, but I think I've made some really big mistakes, but I've
Yeah.
made them and then I've recovered from them, which has ultimately made me stronger. So I think they had to happen to bring me on my journey.
And I think that's a powerful, strong message. Like I've made mistakes as well as the next person, but I think it's not necessarily the mistake that matters. The thing that matters is recovering from that mistake, being
Yeah.
honest with the client, and going sometimes along with them on the journey to fix the mistake as
Hmm.
well. So you not only learn something along the way, but they learn something as well. Do you think that's important?
I really do think that that is important. I've made some humdingers of mistakes over my career, from when I was a teenager and I double booked a wedding, which I had to front up and deal with, um, through to forgetting that there was a European date format in Data Loader when I was first introduced to
Oh wow.
which caused quite a lot of mess, which I then obviously fixed for free. So there's always things that you can learn, and it's what
Mm,
you do with that mistake, how you are transparent with your customer around what's happened. Is absolutely vital for developing relationships with people, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm completely in agreement with you on that one.
yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, that's great to hear. And now, kind of flipping back a little bit to somebody who's thinking about perhaps pursuing a Salesforce based role within hospitality. If there were like typical skills or attributes that you would use to describe that person, what words come to mind? Like curiosity, confidence, like what type of things do you think are important?
I think curiosity is really important because, particularly if you're flying solo, you have to make sure that you keep up to date with everything that's going on in the Salesforce ecosystem.
Hmm.
What's happening with the releases, making sure that you're staying on top of, if you've got certs, you're staying on top of your yearly exams and what have you. So I think that that's really important because Salesforce changes so quickly. If you're not curious about what changes, you very quickly end up creating things with technical debt, which is not good for your customers.
Mm,
So that's really important. I think something else that is really crucial for working in hospitality is being able to flex your style for different types of stakeholders that you're going to come
hmm.
across.
Yeah.
That's probably true for a lot of other industries as well. But if I'm dealing with an event planner one day who's stressing about whether her function sheet works or not, I'm dealing with a CTO the next day, if there is one. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't.
Yeah.
You might be dealing with the chief marketing officer the next day. You might be dealing
Mm.
with then a sales manager the day after that, or somebody saying they've forgotten their password again, or I don't know why, but I'm locked out. I wonder why you're locked out. You've put your password in more than 3 times. So yeah, it's being able to flex your style and being able to articulate sometimes what can be quite complex. Like Salesforce talk in their own language, and
Mm.
they change names for things quite regularly, which can be
Yeah.
quite confusing for customers. And I think, particularly with the customers that I come across, they need to understand what it means for them in real life when they're
Mm.
dealing with whatever it is they're dealing with. Whether it is creating a function sheet, whether it is dealing with a request for a proposal, or you know whether they've got a new local corporate customer that they're trying to sign up, and how they then look at what's contracted versus what has actually been delivered from that customer. They need to you need to be able to train and describe how Salesforce will work in a way that is real for what their users are going to experience on a day-to-day basis. And I suppose that's my sweet spot, because my background is in hospitality.
Nice.
I can, understand what they need to do outside of Salesforce to then make the Salesforce piece a bit more relevant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great to hear. And reflecting on a couple of things that you said there, the technical debt thing, a very wise client of mine once told me, or kind of pointed out to me, really, Salesforce create technical debt.
That's true.
And once I realized that and accepted that, I was like, okay, yeah, well, like they do, like, think about user access policies that are coming out, and all of the, I don't know, Apex triggers and flows that currently assign permission sets that are now going to become technical debt as a result of that, So I think that that's maybe a reverse perspective on that, and totally relate to the Salesforce marketing machine that keeps on turning, and they do love a name change. I'm pretty sure at this point, I'm convinced every 6 months they play bingo and roll out some words, and then they decide, okay, actually this product is now called this, and it's Marketing Cloud Engagement, not to be confused by Marketing Cloud Account Engagement.
Yeah.
So
what shall we call Pardot this year?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a great message. And I'm going to kind of sneak in a bonus question now. But Salesforce are doing a lot of stuff within the industry space. And right now I'm working for a non-profit partner, and we're navigating the world of non-profit cloud versus the kind of old style non-profit success pack.
Yeah.
And Salesforce are kind of grouping this under the industry's banner now. Do they do much for hospitality? Is there a hospitality cloud per se, or is there kind of any offering there?
No, there isn't. And I think it's because it's quite a hard sell, because because of the ownership that I explained earlier. It's not always easy to see from the set of accounts that they get given each time they do the rejig each financial year. It's not easy to see actually who owns those hotels. So quite often, because my background is working with these people and I've got a lot of contacts in the industry, quite often I'll get a phone call from one of the account execs at Salesforce going, "Do you know anything about this hotel?" You're like, "Yeah, don't worry about them. They already have it. You just don't know that they have it because they're owned by a management company and the management Salesforce, so they're not going to buy it again." So I can save you some time there, but I know sure this company is still working on Excel spreadsheets and they need it. So go after them. So if I can help, as I said, you've got to give to get, haven't you? So if I can help people in any way like that, I always will.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, that's great to know. And now thinking about this as an opportunity to perhaps demiss something about hospitality, or working with hospitality clients, like when you meet a new person and you tell them that you're working with hospitality, do they often kind of come to perhaps a common misconception or myth about hospitality?
I think most of the things that I come across, I've mentioned already. The ownership of the hotel is something that always surprises people. They think that all Holiday Inns are Holiday Inns and all Holiday Expresses are all Holiday Expresses, and actually there's all sorts of different ownerships across those two brands alone. I think the other thing that people get really surprised about, for the people that I meet in the Salesforce Ohana, is a lot of those people are so tech savvy, and Salesforce is vast. It blows my mind, like the amount of things, the amount of products that they have now, with so many acquisitions, that nobody can possibly know everything about Salesforce, in my opinion. But I think it's sometimes the smallest things can blow the minds in the hospitality sector, because they're dealing with such old tech and such siloed data. Like, I worked in a hotel group in the early noughties where the spa data did not connect to the front desk. The golf data did not connect to the front desk. the meeting and events data did not connect to the front desk. So the front desk had their PMS system to do all the room check-ins and check-outs, but everything else was its siloed data. So there was, all these meetings that had to happen and all this paperwork that was transferred between departments, so that when somebody was checking in, the receptionist knew whether they'd also booked a spa appointment, or whether they'd booked a tea time, or whether they actually had a meeting in the conference centre. So I think people are still surprised that there are hotels out there now that are still in that situation where their data is completely siloed. But I think that's a real opportunity to evolve if there's the appetite to do so.
Yeah, and there's definitely lots of different ways Salesforce can help.
The other thing as well is, like, Salesforce is used across so much of the world right now that when someone's arriving at a hotel, they expect the service to be whatever service they've had just previously, whether it's service from their bank, service from Amazon, service from Sweaty Betty, service from booking their car in for a repair. Everything is so connected that you can't just compare yourselves to other hotels or to other restaurants now. You have to compare yourself to any service anywhere ever, because Salesforce is in all of those places.
Yeah, exactly. I think a recent example of that, I have a couple of pairs of Doc Martens and emailed Doc Martens and got a response back, and I knew straight away, okay, they're using Salesforce.
Yeah.
Because that's a case auto response I've just got with the case number in it. So yeah, I guess that kind of connectedness, like especially when we're talking about a service context, is important. And you're right, like people do kind of start to expect that, but you've had that from one hotel or one provider, so why shouldn't I have it from another one? So I think it's a case of people trying to keep up with each other and make sure that their systems and everything and experiences are connected as well, because obviously you might be engaging with the brand on TikTok and then on booking.com or on their own website. Those experiences are potentially different, and it's kind of about bringing those experiences together as well, don't you think?
Yeah, completely. And you've hit the nail on the head there. Booking.com, everything's automated, everything looks shiny. You then perhaps book on the hotel website and you don't get the same experience, but you're booking the same hotel. And distribution channels for hotels are vast. So I think it's crucial to keep up.
Using booking.com as another example, like recently booked to go somewhere, and a couple of days before got a friendly email telling me what the weather was like in my destination. Now I expect that from every hotel that I book at, because that's what booking.com does. So, and I think it's important, and I think that's where other Salesforce tools like Data Cloud and Marketing Cloud can really kind of shine, by bringing that information together within Data Cloud and then activating it for those personalized marketing journeys. So I think that's really great, and helps to deliver the Salesforce vision of Customer 360 for sure. So that's awesome. Unfortunately, we are now bringing today's episode to a close, but before we do go, what's a way for people to connect with you? And is there any particular pieces of content that you think would help people kind of navigate and understand this space a little bit more?
I tend to do everything on LinkedIn because it's the easiest place to find my network. So I am literally just Tracy Bingham on LinkedIn. So I'm pretty easy to find me in there. And there's a picture of me stood inside a hollow tree. So that's enough to stand out. In terms of content, it's a really interesting one, because most of the content I consume is Salesforce content, because I'm trying to keep up to date with Salesforce, not necessarily content, because there's not that many use cases that are out there that is specific to hospitality, I don't think. Or not that I've come across anyway. But if anyone's ever got any questions, I'm always happy to help.
Thanks again for your time today, and hopefully we will inspire some more people to be more hospitality. So thanks again.
I'd like some more friends if that's possible. So thank you.
Friends are good. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks.